I still believe that it's possible to run this district with fewer central office personnel than what is being proposed.
On top of weighing the impact of possible state bills being debated in Frankfurt, JCPS board members also have to resolve their multi-million-dollar budget deficit. Members are expected to meet again tomorrow. This is for a vote to approve or reject the cuts Superintendent Brian Yearwood is recommending, which would affect the district's central office. Wave News reporter Julie Richardson shares what she's learned after combing through those proposals.
Jose, at Tuesday's board meeting, members said they needed more time to review the organizational charts that Dr. Yearwood is proposing. Now, Yearwood's plan includes eliminating 213 occupied positions and 74 vacant positions, while adding 178 new positions.
JCPS Superintendent Brian Yearwood said at Tuesday's board meeting that his proposed central office cuts are necessary to get to the $132 million of cuts that district staff has been trying to reach. The cuts would add up to about $43 million of that $132 million.
It probably has to pass. As a member of the Board of Education, cannot let the budget be out of balance by $40 million given where we are financially. I mean, the answer to that question is clearly no.
Some of the cuts involve reducing management layers, eliminating assistant superintendents for academics, and some instructional lead positions. Yearwood is also proposing establishing principal supervisors who will oversee a pod of 10 schools.
Those principal supervisors will be charged with making sure they're in those schools, touching base with those principal, with every principal in their pod every week. They will then report up to a regional assistant superintendent who will be over multiple pods.
Yearwood also said there will be opportunities for those whose jobs are eliminated to move to other positions being created. Right now, 85 employees impacted by the eliminations hold active teaching certifications and could transfer to a classroom role. Since the beginning of the budget process, Yearwood has said his priority is not to disrupt classrooms. But board member James Craig says central office cuts will inevitably do that. He told me many central office employees still work in schools, even if they report to someone who is not in a school building.
If the SRO inside of a school building is performing school tasks and building relationships with students and keeping them busy, but that SRO reports to the chief of police, who is in central office, that SRO is considered quote-unquote central office and isn't on the student's organization, isn't on the school's organization chart. This district does a poor job of communicating what central office is.
Craig tells me that because of the tough position the district is in, the board needs to act quick, but he isn't entirely satisfied with how the budget talks have gone.
Do I think the vote should be unanimous? I think the answer to that question is also no, too, because the process has not been one where stakeholders were consulted authentically or that their feedback was ever considered meaningfully.
The board is meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. to vote on those charts. And of course, we will be there and bring you those results. Julie Richardson, Wave News.